Hey everybody. Today, Rahdo rounds up the month of October 2019. And I am giving you this roundup a little early. Normally I wait until the last day of the month to put it out. But this is the month of Essen Spiel, the biggest board game convention in the world. It's going to be in just a few days, and there's, I forget, something like 1,200 new games launching at the convention. And while I came nowhere close to covering 1,000 plus games, a whole bunch of those new games did make it into my house and to my table. And so I wanted to get this roundup out ASAP for folks who might be going to the convention so they could get a little bit more information about some of the games that they'll be able to find at the show. I'm going to talk about 22 games today. Like I said, several of them will be at Essen Spiel. And so, hopefully this will be of use to showgoers, and hopefully, as always, it'll be entertaining for everybody, no matter where you are in the world, whether you're going to board game conventions or not. So, with that out of the way, let's start the countdown, because remember, every month I do a countdown. I start with Jen's and my least favorite game of the month, and I will end with my new game of the month. What will the game of the month be? Well, you'll find out in just a little bit, but we got to start at the top of the list with number 22, Beyond Humanity Colonies. And now, this is a game that's on Kickstarter right now, and I did a paid preview for it, so please bear that in mind. Take my subjective opinion with a grain of salt. But as I said in the video, this is, as far as I'm concerned, the most ambitious board game in history. It is amazing what this is doing because, well, the game itself is all about trying to build a thriving human colony on some faraway planet. It's all about hard science. There's no alien, first contact or, laser battles or anything. This is very, very grounded, realistic. Think The Expanse or something like that. The early days of humanity's colony on this distant planet. And players are all working semi-collaboratively to try to make the colony thrive because, we all have to keep the colonists alive, we as the shared leaders, but only one of us can be elected as the president at the end. So we all have secret goals we're trying to achieve while working together to make sure all 3, 4, 5, 6,000 colonists don't die under our watch. So it's a worker placement game, and every round, players get to do a couple of actions, gathering resources, launching expeditions, doing scientific inquiries, and building up the colony. And that's where things get amazing, because this colony is not just a bunch of colorful tiles that you put on a board, like most colony simulations of any historical setting. You actually get cool, really lovely 3D miniatures that allows you to see the colony building up in front of you, and it looks real. It seems much more, tactile. You can reach out and touch it. But the reason that these are miniatures is not just to make the board look really awesome, which it does. Each one of these modules that you add, life support modules, water reclamation plants, all that kind of stuff, each one of them is filled with microchips. And there's one central one that has batteries and a Bluetooth transmitter. And as you snap more and more of these modules together and they come online, representing what these colonists, these virtual colonists we're trying to keep alive, need to survive, it becomes part of this network where these individual modules are actually all literally talking to each other, sharing data back and forth about transferring of goods from one module to another, immigration, emigration, people moving between modules, new people coming to our colony, people leaving our colony, people changing jobs, people being hungry, people being happy, being angry, revolting. All this stuff is all handled by a virtual simulation that's run by these modules. And it's all communicated to you, the player, through a smartphone or tablet app. And this makes this Beyond Humanity's Colonies the richest, most robust simulation that you've ever seen in board game form. This is normally the kind of stuff you can only see in video games, but in this game, everybody reaches out, touches it, builds it as a physical thing, and there's a solid worker placement game that everybody's playing, driving the whole simulation. It's incredible the amount of verisimilitude that went into the development of this game, and all the attention to detail is just through the roof. And it's a solid worker placement game. Why then is it at the top of my list? Why did it, or the bottom of my list, depending on how you want to look at it? It's the lowest ranked of the games I'm going to talk about this month. The game's been in development for half a decade. And in all that time, I've actually talked to the developers about this a bit. Most of their focus has been on the 3 to 5 player game experience. And while I've only played as a 2-player game, I can see how as a 3, 4, 5 player game, it's really special. And it's obvious that's where all the love and attention is. At this point, with the rules of the prototype I've got, the 2-player game is so-so and needs work. They didn't do any tightening up of the worker placement. Overall, the game isn't quite as satisfying because with only 2 players, you just don't get as much stuff done, as much stuff built over the course of the game as you would with more players, because only half of the resources are being harvested because, like I said, there was no player scaling, or almost no player scaling done at all. And as a 2-player only gamer, that was very frustrating for me and Jen. Also, I was really excited. The game, by default, is a competitive simulation, but it does come with variant rules for cooperative play, which is what I really wanted. But the cooperative rules need work as well. Now, I talked about this at great length in my final thoughts, so you can, and of course, I did a video for this too, so you can go see just how incredible this game is. So, if I had experienced this as a 3, 4, or 5-player game, it would rank easily in the top 5 of the month. Easily. But I only got to play it as a 2-player game, and the 2-player needs work. I've talked to the developers. They do have plans, and my fingers are crossed that ultimately the co-op mode and the 2-player mode will be as good as the core game, which I think ranks much, much higher. But as it is, since I'm a 2-player gamer, and since I'm a Care Bear, I prefer co-op. That's why Beyond Humanity Colonies comes in at number 22, which, like I said right front, it's on Kickstarter right now. You can go check it out and learn more. Hopefully, the developers will post a bit about what their plans are for further evolution of the 2-player game and the co-op. Okay, let's move on to number 21. A very charming little card game called Cat Lady. Actually, I've got the kind of deluxe 2nd edition Cat Lady box that, because the original Cat Lady came out a couple of years ago, and it's a very sweet, unassuming, light, gateway-style card drafting game with a cool central mechanism. There are 9 cards on the table in a 3x3 grid, and on your turn, you will pick one row or column and grab all the cards in that row or column, and you're trying to do set collection. Different types of cats score points differently, doing kind of standard card set collection-y type stuff. The real core interesting decision is, well, okay, I want that cat, but I don't want the other 2 cats in that row. So do I take the column instead? I mean, and trying to navigate that is interesting, especially since once you have cleared out a row or a column, that gets refilled with new cards, but that particular row or column gets blocked off, so no one can choose that. So that might be, the new one is the perfect row or column I need, but I can't choose it until later. So do I go for something else and wait for it? This is nice stuff. The set collection is very nice too. The art is super charming. I like everything about it, but the core set collection is really, well, I said it right front. It's a very simple, lightweight gateway game. If you have somebody in your life you would like to convince of the fun factor of modern designer board games, and you know they love cats, this would be a great one to check out. But for me and Jen, we are generally looking for something a little bit heavier with a little bit more meat on it. And so Cat Lady, as charmed as we were by it, still comes in at number 21. Oh, one more thing I have to say about it. This deluxe tin edition I've got has one really cool feature in that it allows players to make their own custom cat cards based on their own cats in real life. So your cat can appear in the game. That, again, just goes to show how sweet and charming Cat Lady is. But then we move on to number 20. Monster Baby Rescue. Another incredibly sweet, charming, family-friendly, gateway-level Euro-style game. Now, the interesting thing is this one is from designer Vladimir Suchi, who is one of my top 10 favorite designers of all time. Going back to Shipyard, and everybody loves the game that I keep forgetting the name of that is all about trying to get rid of all of your worldly possessions the fastest. Why can I not think of the game? But it's an incredibly popular game. Oh man, this is driving me nuts. I should have looked it up before. I'm just brain farting here. And last year, he had a big hit with Underwater Cities. Actually, Underwater Cities was the first game that he and his wife self-published with their new startup board game publisher, Delicious Games. This year, at Essen Spiel, they're bringing out the first expansion for Underwater Cities, which I would have loved to cover, but they didn't send me that. Instead, they sent me a prototype of their new launch game, Monster Baby Rescue, which, well, let's talk about that. It's lovely. I feel like I'm going to repeat myself a lot about Cat Lady. It's incredibly charming, incredibly sweet, and incredibly lightweight. This is a great game to play with kids or first-time gamers, and as such, it's a little bit too light for us. But what is it? This is a game where everybody has their own cute little adorable baby monster that they have to take care of. They have to make a jungle gym for it. They have to give him nice comfy beds to sleep in, or him or her. They have to meet its needs if it wants like lots of treasure, because sometimes monsters want treasure, or it wants and also they have to see to its physical needs, because when they adopt this monster, it's in a sad, sickly state, and over the course of the game, you can increase the mental and physical well-being of this creature, which means he actually changes. You can see him going from frown and crying to and all dirty to happy and upbeat and getting lots of bling put on them and stuff like that. And the whole thing is driven by a time track mechanism, which is a really great mechanism, one of my favorite mechanisms, and it works really well here. It's a little different than most time track games, because in most time track games, going all the way back to Thebes, the way it works is whoever is furthest back on the time track is the next player. So one player might get several turns in a row, but when you move forward, the farther forward you move, the more powerful your move is, which means you give other players more opportunities to do stuff. And in most games, players hopscotch over each other. In this game, that isn't the case. If in a given turn I move forward 2 steps on the time track, and then your turn, you would move forward 2 time steps. You would actually skip over me and move forward 3. That doesn't happen now because we all move on to the same spot. It's kind of like portions of time. It's like Tokaido is a very popular time track game where some spaces multiple players can occupy at the same time. In this game, all spaces are like that. And it does change up the rhythm of time track games in an interesting and fresh way. I liked it. And of course, again, I can't stress enough how incredibly gorgeous and charming and lovely. It can't help but put a smile on your face, this game. And there's a lot of variety with the in-game scoring as well, because every time you set up all these different metrics, it's going to be a different combination every time as everybody's racing to be the first to improve the quality of the monster's life in different ways. Everything here works great. It's a very solidly designed game. Again, it's just too lightweight for me and Jen. Although the interesting thing is, if you find you want to play this with younger kids, the game comes with special rules to make it even more lightweight by taking out some of the more complex elements. So the whole family can play, which I think is perfect because this is definitely targeted at light first-time gamers and gateway family-style gaming. And it does that brilliantly. It's just not what Jan and I are looking for. So as much as I respect the design, Monster Baby Rescue comes in at number 20. Then we move on to number 19. Hunted, which is another game that's on Kickstarter. So remember that I did a paid preview for this. And interesting is, Hunted comes in 2 different boxes. And if you go to the Kickstarter page, you can get one or the other or both and pay a little bit less. The 2 different variants of Hunted, which is a solo adventure exploration game, basically, it recreates the events, is a rethemed version of the movie Aliens. Or you can instead play a rethemed, a version, or not rethemed, but a retelling, a game inspired by Aliens, or a game inspired by Die Hard. And the interesting thing is, while the core gameplay of both of these games, the Die Hard or the Alien version, I forget the names of the 2. One is like not Nakatomi Tower, but some Fukushima Tower, and the other one's Colony 451, because of the space colony you're at, or the terrorist-filled skyscraper you're trying to escape as a cop. The interesting thing is, while they both are wonderful solo games that are all about push your luck. On your turn, you draw more and more and more cards, which give you access to more and more resources you need to travel further through, well, the mining colony or the satellite, always trying to get to the final boss fight. But if you draw too many cards, you might bust and get attacked by terrorists or aliens and lose all of those cool resources you were building up for. So, every round, it's always just tougher and scarier. And when do I cash in the cards that have been laid out? And when do I push my luck to try to get a better combination of cards? And, but always risking, an explosion of violence happening, and then all those cards get swept away. That push your luck game is very, very good. But the interesting thing about the Hunted is the two different versions have very different ways to resolve combat, because eventually you will end up fighting terrorists or aliens. In the John McClane Die Hard one, you resolve combat through dice rolling, and it's very good, solid. Roll to resolve. Roll your dice to represent firing your machine gun. The more bullets you spend from your gun, the more dice you get to roll, and hopefully you get enough successes to take out whatever terrorist is attacking you, because you're burning through time and ammo the longer the fight goes on. And that's not the one I played. I played the mining colony one, where instead of rolling dice, we are flipping chips in a dexterity game, trying to hit a physical target on the alien. And I just gotta say, it's so cool. Both of these games have this core idea. They really recreate the feeling of the movies that they were inspired by, and they are just super solid solo gameplay experiences. And that's my only problem. I generally don't play solo. If I were a diehard solo gamer, these would rate super high for this month. But what I found myself as I was playing, I really wanted to share it with my wife, Jen, and I wished that the game had some system that said, hey, you know what, if you get 2 copies, of the alien one, or the 2 players can be playing simultaneously, both trying to make it through, and so we could help each other, because I think with a little bit more work, these could be fantastic co-op games as well. But as it is, they're great solo experiences, but I'm not necessarily looking for solo, which is why Hunted comes in at number 19. Then, number 18 is Deckscape Behind the Curtain and Deckscape Curse of the Sphinx. The 2 latest editions of my favorite escape room in your home, Deckscape. And like always, my wife and I had a great time with these. And I don't want to go into too much detail about them, because obviously I don't want to spoil any of the puzzles. I have done run-throughs of how Deckscape works in the past. If you want to know how Deckscape works, it's amazing how much creativity they bring to basically just a deck of cards that you search through, solving puzzle after puzzle after puzzle to escape from a crazy situation. The number one thing that has impressed me more than anything else about Deckscape up until now, up until these 2 editions, is the way that they ensure that the puzzles you're trying to solve don't just feel random and just plugged in for puzzle's sake. That's the kind of curse of all escape rooms, in that, well, yeah, it's a cool situation I'm in, but how do I get out of it? By solving a bunch of random puzzles that make no sense. They're here solely to be solved. Previous Deckscapes didn't have that problem. All the puzzles you solved, because of the way their system works, which is brilliant, really fit the place you were in. And it felt like, oh, I'm trying to do things I would have to do in this circumstance. That is true to a certain extent with Behind the Curtain, which is all about you went to a magic show and something went wrong and you found yourself literally behind, backstage, and you're trying to get out. You're trying to get back to your seat, basically, because you got stuck backstage, but of course you have to solve puzzles to do it. This one, when we were playing it, it's like, this feels a little arbitrary. Yes, there are thematic reasons why we're having to do these, because it's magicians, and magicians are puzzly, magic, puzzle things. But it felt a little bit of a stretch, but it was okay. And again, the puzzles were great. We had a good time. The next one, The Curse of the Sphinx, where we're trapped inside a pyramid in modern Egypt trying to get out because, hey, there's a Curse of the Sphinx and we got to get out. This one felt so much like other escape rooms. I was a little disappointed. It's totally arbitrary and random. There's a few really cool thematic puzzles thrown in, but for the most part, they're not. And I was disappointed to see that, because one of the strengths of Deckscape falters a bit here. Another interesting thing, though, for people who have tried previous Deckscapes and didn't like them, another reason we love Deckscape is they are by far the easiest, most user-friendly And these ones, they definitely ratcheted up the difficulty level more than any of the previous ones in the series. They were still, I would say, easier than what you get out of, Exit the Game or Unlock or any of these other series, but they were a little bit more challenging. So for folks who are looking for that, that's there. And they were still full of really cool, wonderful things. Dexterity games and memory games, which normally would be a bad thing, but we actually thought it worked really well. And overall, we enjoyed it. We want to continue Deckscaping, but I'm hoping in the future they get back to their core competency, which is puzzle adventures that make thematic sense. But anyway, so that's why they came in maybe a little bit higher than previous Deckscapes would have, which would have probably been my top 10. Number 18, Deckscape, the 2 latest chapters. Then number 17 is Kohaku, which is another game on Kickstarter. So again, bear that in mind that I did a paid preview. And this is a gorgeous little tile laying game where we are building koi ponds. And the interesting thing is, every round you draft, you get 2 tiles that you're going to add to your ever-expanding koi pond, and the way you put tiles next to each other scores points in a variety of different ways, and at the end of the game, you've got a beautiful-looking pond that you would love to go and, meditate by in real life, or relax. It's just sweet and serene and lovely. The interesting part is, all the tiles you can draft, well, it's kind of like Cat Lady now that I think about it, which I mentioned before. They're in a grid, and you can't just grab any 2 you want, because every turn you take 2. You have to take 2 that are adjacent to each other. And so the perfect tile you want might be next to a bunch of tiles you have no use for. And so that becomes the puzzly thing, trying to find a pair of tiles you can grab that will both work well for your ever-expanding koi pond. And it works. It's wonderful. It's charming. And the only reason it isn't higher is because, again, it's pretty lightweight. But man, Jen, I think it rates higher than the other ones because, Jen, I found this just so peaceful and calm and serene and relaxing. It really came at a good time for us. So even though I think it's a bit too lightweight, because again, it's a perfect gateway family style game, just a little bit too lightweight for me and Jen, which is why it's up at the upper end. Oh, by the way, if you check out the Kickstarter page, one thing is they're doing a deluxe version where instead of cardboard tiles, they have acrylic tiles that make it look like the fish are actually underwater, and the dragonflies and stuff, that the flowers that float above the water are at the top of the acrylic, so it has this 3D appearance that looks amazing, that I think would give Azul or other gorgeous modern abstract games a run for its money. The art is gorgeous no matter what, though, as you can see. And that is number 17, Kohaku. Then number 16 is Jiguan, the Eastern Mechanist. Now, this is a very interesting, I'm going to go so far as to say funky game that, wow, I didn't make this connection just now, once again is driven, the tension you feel every round is driven by a core decision. Every round I'm going to grab 2 gears, mechanical gears that have numbers and colors associated with them, and then put them in a little grid. And I want to puzzle them together in the grid such that I'm actually trying to build these mechanical beasties, these mechanical wonders, to score points and unlock special powers and get more mechanical beasties to build blueprints and all of that. But every gear I put into this grid, I have to pay attention to the color and the number, because on the outskirts of the grid is where the blueprints for the mechanical beasties are. And if I put a gear down in a row or column or diagonally that matches the blueprints or the creatures on the extremities, the mechanical beasts on the extremities, I score energy. And I can convert that energy into getting more stuff. So I want to generate as much energy as possible. So I always want to put blue gears next to blue beasties, red gears next to red beasties, stuff like that. But each beast has a specific number. To build it, I have to have a 9 or a 7 or whatever it might be. And the 3 gears that will ultimately be in that row leading up to that beast that needs a total of 12, those 3 gears numerical values have to exactly equal that, not higher than, not lower than. And so there's always this tricky thing of, well, I want to put all these colors together so I can activate them, I can activate the blueprints and get energy. But I also, at one point, I don't care about the color. I care about the number to make sure I hit the exact right totals to actually build the things, because that's how I win the game. And of course, it's always going to be tricky to achieve both of those. And the interesting thing is, once I do build one of these beasties, they actually stay. They flip and become a more powerful energy generator, but they still occupy the same space. And 2 of the 3 gears that were in that row or column get removed. And maybe those were the ones that I needed for some other beastie that was in another row or column. So it's a constantly shifting, evolving little Rubik's Cube of a puzzle that is very neat and sharp with, and it unlocks all kinds of special powers and whatnot. That isn't what I was talking about, though, when I started by saying, wow, this has a really interesting overlap with Cat Lady and Kohaku. Because how do we get those gears? Maybe I should have led with that. They are, there's a collection of gears over on the side that you can draft from. A bunch of stacks of them, and these stacks are randomly generated, or randomly filled up with gears of different colors and numbers. And when I take those gears, I have to take 2 adjacent ones. So, like Kohaku, where I have to take 2 adjacent. Like Cat Lady, where I have to take 3 in a row. All of the stuff I'm trying to do over here, this big puzzly game, is driven by this drafting game that puts really tough restrictions on me. And the 2 things combined, oh man, they work really well. This is where I said those other games were really wonderful and charming and sharp and well designed, but too light for us. Jiguan, Eastern Mechanist, is not. It is definitely got 2 interesting, one really tough, interesting puzzle, and a cool little drafting game that's totally separate. And then on top of that, it's also got this progress game of, getting new powers and cards off these different pagodas. There's a lot going on, and it's very, very sharp. I really recommend it quite highly. But the only reason it ranks this low, this could have potentially cracked the top 10. I'm having to ding it a little bit, knock it down a little bit, because I really struggled with the rules on this one. They were very, very tough going. And that's... that shouldn't be the case. I wish it had gotten a little bit more blind play testing. And so it's not the fault of the gameplay. The gameplay is very, very sharp, but the rules take this from like a top 10 candidate to my number 15, or number 16, I'm sorry, Jiguan, the Eastern Mechanist. Then we move on to number 15, Trismegistus, which I think might be one of the biggest hits at Essenspiel this year. I know going in, a lot of people are going to be seeking it out because this is the latest heavy Euro simulation from one of the co-designers of last year's Teotihuacan and one of the most popular modern Euros of all time, Tzolk'in the Mayan Calendar. Daniel Taschini, and he's done a bunch of other games besides, and he's got a very sharp co-designer here as well. But enough about that. What is the game? This is where we are alchemists trying to transmute base materials into better base materials so that we can complete experiments so that we can score a lot of points over the course of the game. And this game is heavy. It might be the heaviest game I'm going to play this year. It almost feels like a Vital Lacerda style game. It almost feels like it has that level of, even though the core game is so simple and smooth and elegant, just every turn I am just drafting a die and playing it to do one of a few different things I can do with this die, but that simple choice just explodes into a complex simulation of cause and effect change and compromises you have to make to be able to achieve your secret goals and work your way up all kinds of different stratosphere and leverage the draft, because at its heart, this is a dice drafting game, and the draft is tense. And the interesting thing too is, once you draft a die, you don't just use it that turn and then it goes away. It's that these dice have the potential to power your experiments for several turns. So you might be making a commitment by doing one thing. You might be committing to your next 3 or 4 turns worth of content because you continue to use that one die as the basis for all your actions until you've sucked all the potency out of it. It's cool. It's clever. It's sharp and deep. And like a Vito Lacerda game, it's almost getting a little bit too heavy and crunchy for me and Jen. We enjoyed it the same way we enjoy Vinos or On Mars or Lisboa or whatnot, but it almost felt like it was a little bit too much. And it wasn't. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying this is as heavy as Lisboa. This is kind of a lighter weight Vito Lacerda game, which still makes it much heavier than most of the games you'll play in a given year. And it's very sharp, very well designed. I guess my other reason I didn't put it up higher is, I'll be honest, I am just not interested in making potions. The theme itself of alchemy does not draw me in does not, I don't find it personally as compelling. So that kind of knocked it down. It's not the fault of the game. A lot of people love alchemy and transmuting, lead to copper to tin to all the way up to silver and gold and all of that. Anyway, like I said, I think this is going to be a monster hit. I think it's probably going to make a lot of people's top 10s of the year at the end of the year. My number 15 for the month, Trismegistus. Then we go on to number 14, A Fistful of Meeples, which is the third game this year from designer Johnny Pack, who is really just coming out of nowhere and becoming a designer to watch. Earlier this year, we had Sierra West, and just now shipping to Kickstarter backers, and at Essen will be Coloma, which is a game I covered months ago when it was on Kickstarter. And Johnny's got a third game. And really, these three games together feel like a trilogy. Sierra West was all about pioneer spirit, conquering, the American West, and then Coloma was about building an Old West town, with those same pioneers. And now this new one is the town has been built, and it's literally a fistful of meeples. The town is a Mancala, and on your turn you grab bunches of meeples and drop them around the town, like a Mancala game, like Trajan or what do you call it? Five Tribes or what have you. The interesting thing about this game is most Mancala games, you pick up the group and then you drop them off, and the last piece you put down is the thing you activate, because that's traditionally how a Mancala works. The big twist here is you activate every meeple you drop off. So you might grab 5 meeples, and now you've got to figure out how to deploy them all, not only to set up future turns or prevent your opponent from getting access to future turns, but also to make sure every one of those meeples helps you and doesn't help your opponent, because as the game goes on, players take ownership of all the buildings, and then they can get benefits. If I might happen to drop off a miner in front of your building, you will benefit from that. So I got to make sure I don't do that. But maybe I need to, because I really need to put this outlaw over here at this other place because I want him to rob these other NPCs, and I want to put this deputy over here to arrest these other outlaws. So that leaves me no choice but to put the miner in front of your building so you get some resources on my turn. It's a fun, sharp little game. Jen and I enjoyed it quite a bit. Tiny footprint, but a lot to think about. And like I said, it really flips basic Mancala rules on their head and comes up with something really clever and original. It's also very, very thematic. And my only complaint with it, the only thing that keeps it from being higher is, I would say it's a good 2-player game, but oh my gosh, it's going to be great with more players. Because the most interesting thing about it is, as the game goes on, and this Mancala becomes a minefield for you, because well, in a 2-player game, half of the buildings will be owned by your opponent. I think it's much more fun if 20 or 25% is controlled by one opponent and 25% is controlled by another opponent, so that the minefield becomes even more interesting to navigate. I suspect it'll be better with 3 or 4, but it's still, Jen and I, we absolutely adore this game at 2, and that is my number 14, A Fistful of Meeples. Then, move on to number 13, another Kickstarter game, which means another paid preview for The Search for Planet X. And oh my gosh, this game is really sharp because it is all about players as astronomers searching for, Planet 9, the mysterious potential planet that in real life we suspect is actually out there as part of our solar system, but we haven't found it yet. We know it's out there, or we suspect it's out there, because of the behavior of other heavenly bodies that we've observed, and therefore, because these things are happening this way, there must be a planet. So that's a big part of what astronomers do in real life. They make observations and then deduce, and come to conclusions based on that. That's exactly what we're doing in Search for Planet X. And I gotta say, this game really makes you feel like you are engaging in the same sorts of activities that a real-world astronomer does. You're scanning the night sky, studying different celestial bodies, and trying to infer from what you have observed what is going to be in neighboring regions as players race to be the first to prove definitively where Planet X must be. And it's great because, well, this might not be great for some people, but I love it. It's driven by an app, by a smartphone or a tablet app. And this is absolutely crucial. The game wouldn't work without this because, of course, as part of setup, the app has figured out where in the night sky all the gaseous bodies, all the dwarf planets, all the asteroids and comets, and all where the empty sectors are. And it won't tell you that. It will just give you piecemeal bits of information every time you try to scan certain sectors or deep dive into a certain sector or try to get do research into particular types of heavenly bodies. And when you do this, everybody knows broadly what it is you're trying to study, but only you get the results of the app, because the app you hold in. I'm going to make a note of that, because now that I figured out that there must be a dwarf planet here, I know Planet X. Well, it's much more likely I've now got 2 more places, because Planet X is always, I'm trying to remember the particulars. There's specific rules, and you do all this deduction, and it's super smart, super fun. The app really makes it come to life. And, a few years ago, there was a game that was very popular called Alchemist that did the exact same thing, but you used the app to try to figure out the chemical composition of reagents that you were using to make potions. And that game was brilliant, but that game was super duper heavy. And Jen and I found ultimately it was just a bit too much for us to want to keep going back to. Search for Planet X is for players who like the idea of Alchemist. They want to do deductive reasoning and use an app to get clues and race everybody to come up with the ultimate thing, and publish their findings that other people can then try to use to increase their own knowledge. All that stuff, but in a much more simple, streamlined game that you could pretty much play as a gateway game. The rules here are super simple, easy to teach, but the game is super deep and rich with variable difficulty levels for experts or novices. Everything about this game is absolutely stellar, including the presentation and including the fact that it's driven by a time track, which, as I mentioned earlier in Monster Baby Rescue, is one of my favorite gameplay mechanisms. It works really well here, and it's a super sharp game. All right, that was my number 13, The Search for Planet X. Then, number 12, another game on Kickstarter, another paid preview for Roam and Roll. And here's Roam and Roll's number 1 claim to fame. I think it's pretty safe to say this is the heaviest roll and write game the industry has ever seen. I'm not saying this is going to, supplant Steam or an 18xx game, but this is so far above and beyond what, your typical roll and writes do of, I'm just going to roll some dice and make note of some things and try and score points, and, or even, a Gone Shown Clever, some would argue is a much deeper, richer game, but that's peanuts compared to Roam and Roll, which is more like a mid-weight Euro, because what we're trying to do is rebuild Rome after the Great Fire, and every round there's a bunch of dice. They're all cool, special, custom dice, and we're drafting them, and these dice, we can use them either for the resources they provide us or for the actions they provide us to be able to build buildings in Rome and to take over colonies outside of Rome, to build up the famous Roman roads. And the interesting thing about this game is, as the city grows up and as our colonies throughout Europe, throughout the world grow up, the game is constantly full and constantly focused on players creating opportunities for other players. Hey, if you conquer a new colony, hey, well, I happen to have some stone. On my turn, if I drafted correctly, I'll be able to use the dice I've got to now build roads to your colony, and we'll both benefit from it. If you just built an amphitheater right, up on one of the upper hills of one of the 7 hills of Rome, and how fortunate that I happen to have a building die this round because I drafted one of those. I'll build right next to you, because my building needs to build next to buildings on that hill, and so you've done the first step that I needed, but me building next to you means you now get to activate your building and get resources out of it. This game, the number of times Jen and I, as we were playing a competitive game, said, "Oh, thank you very much, that's exactly what I needed," was awesome. And I always love games that create circumstances where players aren't fighting each other, but instead creating opportunities for each other. And Roam and Roll, that it is just chock-a-block with this. And then on top of that, it's still got all the fun, tactile enjoyment of roll and writes as you were simultaneously and collaboratively, to some extent, building this city, but also competing to get the most points. It is super sharp, a lot of fun. Number 12, Roam and Roll. Then we move on to number 11, Pharaon. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that. It's tough to pronounce. You can see how I put it on screen there. But this is a worker placement game that is players living the life of a young pharaoh from babyhood to death. And over the course of your life, all of our efforts are going to be spent on preparing for the afterlife, making the proper burial chamber, getting the scribes to tell our stories, and influencing the nobles of society and all the rest of it. It's a worker placement game crossed with resource management, because normally in a worker placement game, I send out workers to get resources, wood and stone and all of that stuff, so I can use those things to make points. In this game, the resources that you are collecting are the workers. If I want to go and get in good with the nobles, I have to spend my resources as a worker to block a worker placement spot, so now other players can't go there. So I have to spend the resources I needed to do stuff to trigger the actions that will allow me to spend other resources to do things. That in and of itself is very cool and a nice twist. It's not the first game to do it, but it does it really, really well. The more important thing that makes this game special is the worker placement board itself, because at the center of the board is a spinning turntable. And every round, we are going to rotate that turntable, and that radically changes the economy. In one round, trade goods will get you in good with the scribes. And, I've got a lot of trade goods, but I don't care about scribes. I'm trying to use these trade goods to build my burial chamber. Well, if I wait 2 rounds, that turntable is going to rotate a bunch, and then trade goods will be good for doing that action. But if I'm going to have to wait all that time, what am I going to do in the meantime? Because I want to save those trade goods for 2 rounds down the road, because I can see how the economy is going to change. Well, in the meantime, if in a given round, I feel like I don't want to do very much, I'm trying to save up for the next round when everything will be perfect for me, you can go on ahead and pass early, because the sooner you pass, you get to keep going. While other players keep on taking turns in a given round, you start harvesting more and more resources for free. And everybody else can see it happening. And so they're like, I got to pass too, because I don't want you to get stuff for free, but I got to keep on doing this stuff before the turntable turns, while my my food stuffs are going to be particularly useful what I need. Really clever, super sharp stuff, just barely misses the top 10 in a very good month. My number 11, Pharaon. Then we move on to number 10, Skytopia. So this is a very, very cool game from publisher Cosmodrome and the designer of Cosmodrome's hit last year, Smartphone Inc. And Smartphone Inc. put Ivan Lashkin on the map as a sharp designer to watch. Skytopia reinforces that in a big, big way. This is a very, very cool game. It's I guess you'd call it a dice worker placement game. But there's a few interesting things. Most dice worker placement games, I got all my dice, I roll them up, and that tells me how I can use these dice. Not so here. There is a group of cards out that we are trying to draft. And what I do is, I take one of my dice, and I can set it to whatever value I want, 1 to 6, and I put it on that card. And that tells me that sometime in the next few rounds, depending on how I set my die, I'll be able to build that card and add it to my own little floating castle in the sky. Think Laputa, one of my favorite animated films of all time. The interesting thing is, I can set it up. I can set the die. I can set it to a value that means, I'll get this thing built immediately, and it'll be available to me next round. So right off the bat. But that's crazy expensive to do it. Much better to set the die so that, it's going to take 3 rounds for me to build this thing. But that meant I didn't have to pay very much. So I only pay a little bit of money, and now I'm going to have to wait 4 rounds until I actually get that thing built. But when I eventually do get it built, it'll be a big payoff, and I saved cash, so I can do other things. That's the fundamental decision. Build things quick, or set yourself up to build them in the future, but then that means you have to start making really complex long-term plans, because, that thing's going to be built for me in 4 rounds. So in the meantime, if I get this one over here built in 2 rounds, because now I've got enough money, that thing could be built before this other thing, and so I'll do this, because the interesting thing is, once a thing gets built and you add it to your own little floating city in the sky, say it's a red card, it will trigger cascade style all the other previous red cards you built. And that is a brilliant mechanism that is so powerful. That combo chain thing, probably most famous from Deus, where it was a brilliantly put to use. It works wonderfully here as well. So again, you're doing all this long-term planning of this building will be built a long time in the future, and I got to get ready for that and get my other ducks in a row so it can really trigger a bunch of really nice combo chains, and I like it a lot. It gets more complex, though, because, hey, all right, fine. I make my long-term plans. I've set my plans in motion. We'll see how that works out. It's going to be 4 rounds until I get that green building built. You then decide, you put that die on there. I'm going to pay a little bit more and put my die on the same card, and now it's going to get built for me in 2 rounds. And you're like, I can't build that building now because you're going to get it built before I do and it'll disappear. Now, when that happens, I do get something. Because I took so long, I didn't invest much. And when I get kicked out because you built it, I will then get more money that I can use elsewhere. So it's a super sharp little game, a very clever card drafting system that is all about making long-term plans to trigger really awesome combo chains, and everything about this game is super sharp. My only problem with it, the reason it's not a top fiver is my prototype has early prototype rules, and I was really confused about a few things. So Jen and I, we just took our best guess. I wrote like a half a dozen questions to Cosmodrome, and they never replied. I've been waiting weeks. I was planning on doing a full run-through for this month, but I never got the reply back. So this might rate even higher after I get some of those weird little questions I got. Because like there's one particular power you can get on a card that seems way more powerful than anything else. And I needed some explanation about that because maybe I'm misunderstanding it. There were some weird things because there are ways you can get multiple cards to be the dice to be the same value. And so suddenly, oh, we both build at the same time. What happens there? Like I said, these are all prototype issues. I'm sure they'll be worked out. And I'm looking forward to finding out the answers to that, which might push Skytopia even higher. But even with the confusion, it made my top 10, Skytopia. Moving right along to number 9, Tranquility. Now, this is a Kickstarter that has not launched yet. It's going to launch in early November. And unlike the other Kickstarters I'm talking about today, this one is not a paid preview because they didn't pay me money, but they said, boy, could you cover it? And I took a look at it and I said, this looks like a really sharp little game. Tell you what, send me a prototype. I'll mention it in the roundup after Jen and I have played it. Won't charge you anything because I charge for full run-throughs or, and previews and all that. So, it's a Kickstarter game coming soon. There is no paid preview here. And what did Jen and I think? Well, hey, it's my number 9 game of the month in a very strong month full of big Essen candidates. We love this game. It is so wonderful. It's one of those imperfect cooperative communication games where I've got my hand of cards. I can't tell you what's in my hand. And you can't tell me what's in your hand, but somehow we have to figure out a way to solve this puzzle working together. Every turn, we're going to play a card out to the board. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to build, a 6x6 grid of cards that are numbered 1 to 80. And they have to be played in sequential order. Now, they don't have to be 1, 2, 3, 4. It could be 1, 2, 4, 12, 15, 23, 24, 25, etc., etc. But every turn, I'm just going to play a card out somewhere on the grid. And I'm going to hope that in doing that, I don't ruin your plans for what you need to do. Because we know there's cards numbered 1 through 80, but every time I put a card down, I'm limiting what we're both going to be able to do for the rest of the game. And so it is a very tough and challenging puzzle. Now, that's just the base game. But the game comes with several different little modules you can turn on that really ratchet up the complexity and the fun factor. Because in addition to just these islands that are numbered 1 through 80 that we can get, we can also add to the big draw deck sea monsters that will force us. Eventually, it's in my hand now. I eventually have to play this card to destroy one of the islands that one of us has played previously. And I'm going to have to do it because I can't win. We can't win if I've got sea monsters in my hand. So I'm going to have to destroy something. But what if I end up destroying something that you need? Because it's perfect for the card you were about to play next. And you can play storms that change the rules, like suddenly my hand size changes, or I have to pay more to play adjacent to other cards, or similar type things. That's not exactly what the powers are. But it's a clever game. It's gorgeous. The first time we played it, I'm like, okay, I think I get it. This is really cool. And we finished and we lost. And Jen said, we're playing again right now. And then she played again. We played this game 4 times in a row. That never happens. But Jen, we will win. And every time we got a little bit closer. And we probably should have turned off because we were playing with all the modules turned on, which, increased its difficulty level. But yeah. This game is super sharp. If you like cooperative games and you like the idea that have been championed by Hanabi and then we held hands and other games where, okay, we have to figure out a way to work together even though we can't talk about what we're doing, this is a phenomenal example and we loved it. My number 9, Tranquility. Like I said, coming to Kickstarter in November. Then, number 8, Circadians, which is another dice worker placement game. And the interesting thing about this one, which is also interesting, another game about us colonizing faraway planets, but unlike, Beyond Humanities, which is like a hard science simulation of what will really happen when we someday colonize planets. This is a more sci-fi thing. There are humanoid aliens on these planets. And the beautiful thing is, we come in peace. We are not there to subjugate the aliens, but instead to work with them. Give them what they need so they can give us what we need, so we can all work in harmony on this new home we find ourselves on. The interesting thing about it from a gameplay point of view is it is a dice worker placement game, but we all assign our dice workers in secret behind shields. And then we reveal at the same time, and those dice that we assigned in secret, they can either stay in our own little bases, which means they're just going to harvest resources we need to do actions, or they could be sent out onto the planet. And that then becomes a very tight and tense worker placement game. It reminds me a lot of the hidden planning in secret and then revealing of like Dungeon Pets or Fresco. But it's very, very cool here because every die has these two functions. Do I keep it home or do I send it out? Once you reveal, I see, oh, everybody's sending out, and you're sending out some 6s, and I think I know where you're going to go. Am I going to be able to get there before you, or do I have to change all my plans? So that's a really, really cool core of the game. The other cool core thing about the game, though, is that a lot of the actions we can do, once we've done them, we lose those dice forever. And that creates so much excitement and tension. There's ways to get dice back, but having to sacrifice workers to achieve long-term goals is a real favorite of mine, and it works really well here in Circadians. And before I move on to number 7, Cosmic Colonies, I'm gonna have to go check because I'm worried my sound is messed up. Hold on, everybody. We'll be right back. And it turns out, yes, I don't know. This thing is failing. I've got another one that converts the bigger jacks into the smaller jack to plug into my camera. I don't know if it's these, or if it's the cable, or if it's the camera that's starting to die, but it's fine, because apparently for the last 10 minutes, everything in the left channel is static, but the right channel is fine, so I'll fix this in post. I hate having to do it, but let's continue. What was I just talking about? I think number 8, Circadians. So number 7 is another Kickstarter game, and this is once again a paid preview for Cosmic Colonies. Is this now the 3rd game about interstellar colonization? I guess so. And in this one, it's again not fanciful or science fiction. It's like Beyond Humanity, where we are doing early steps of building colonies on asteroids in the Kuiper Belt within our own solar system. And this is a very sharp game. Again, paid preview, so bear that in mind, but we liked it quite a bit from designer Scott Alms. It's a card drafting game where, unlike most card drafting games inspired by Seven Wonders or Sushi Go, where I've got a hand of cards, I pick the one that's perfect for me, and then I give the rest to you, and you give them, and they go around like that. In this game, I got a hand of cards, I pick the one that's perfect for me, and after I do its action, I give that one away and keep all the other cards that I didn't want to play at that point. That's brilliant. It is such a cool idea, and it fits thematically too. Basically, the notion is that we're all in the same asteroid field, and after I've used a card, which represents one of the workers that will help me set up my mining colony on my asteroid, he then orbits to the next player, he or she. Another interesting thing, there's actually several really cool things about this game, but that draft, it's so fresh and so different because it's not about, well, I want to play this for myself, but I got to use this one because if I hand it to you, it'll be really great. Now, I'm playing the card that's best for me, but as soon as I put it down, you on the other side of the table, you can see, that card's coming my way in a couple of turns. I better start planning for that. Because if you've seen what I played, and you know it'll eventually come to you. That's awesome. It's really cool. But if that weren't enough, the rest of the game is neat too, because we're using these cards to basically build up our colony, and that is done by polyomino Tetris tiles that are very, very tough. First, we have to harvest resources from our asteroid to be able to build these facilities that come in Tetris shapes, and we are trying to cover up the mineral deposits without covering up the point scoring generating spots to get to what we want to keep some spots uncovered, cover other spots, and that's a really cool tiling puzzle. The card drafting is absolutely brilliant, and if all that weren't enough, there's a third cool thing as well, because each one of these cards that we're drafting for has 2 functions, a day and a night. And every round, I don't just pick one card, I pick 2. One of the cards, I'll use the day function. The other card, I'll use the night function. And trying to mix and match and balance which are the best way to go is really, really tricky. And if all that weren't enough, These cards also have initiative values on them because we all reveal at the same time what cards we've chose, but there are very hugely limited resources available to us on these asteroids, and so it's first come first serve for everything. The buildings you want to build, the resources you want to get, and if I play cards that have a faster initiative than you, I will get to move before you. So you might have chosen these two cards with a perfect plan, assuming, oh, I'll play this one and I'll get me the stuff I need, I'll play this one to do the build, but I turned out to be faster, and so that means I will get to grab the resource you were going to do, and now suddenly you got to come up with a completely different plan. And that's really, really cool. Actually, I think I've got it wrong. I think you use the day and night on both. Oh, go watch my run through. You can see, I mean, this was like almost a month ago I played this thing, but I was blown away by it. I'm now just thinking about it, I'm wondering, why didn't I rank it higher? Because Cosmic Colonies at my number 7 is fantastic. It must be because 6 through 1 are even better. Let's continue with number 6, The Trails of Tucana. Now, this is from the design team that brought us Santa Maria, and more importantly, Avenue, which is one of my favorite roll and writes of all time. Although it's a flip and write, but that's splitting hairs. It's a random generating thing that causes us to write things on pieces of paper. Avenue, go watch my run-through for it that I did years ago now, because it's a bingo-style game where every round a card is drawn, and everybody uses that card to say what type of roads we can draw on our little map as we're trying to connect villages together and get fruit and stuff like that. Trails of Tucana is the same basic idea, except now we're drawing 2 cards, one, which each show landscape tiles like mountain and river, or forest and desert. So if we draw a forest and a desert, that means somewhere on my hex grid, I have to put a road connecting a forest and a desert. And over the course of the game, I'm trying to connect all these little individual roads to become one big network to connect as many villages as possible while hitting all the prime sites along the way. Oh my gosh, this is good. Just like Avenue is fantastic, this great, everybody's getting the same seed, and yet we're all trying to do different things. And for people who are always bothered by, hey, it's everybody can just copy each other because we all have the same map, this game has a very cool setup step that ensures we all have different layouts. So there's similar layouts, but still kind of different. So there's none of the copy behavior if you play with people, I imagine small children who might be prone to that. So everybody has to solve their own problems, and that's really appreciated. This is almost as good as Avenue was, and Avenue was in my top 10 of that year. The only thing I'm missing from Avenue is it had a very, very cool, almost kind of push your luck scoring system where you have to keep, every time you do, I think there's 3 scoring rounds over the game, you have to score more and more and more points, so you score nothing for that round. This is a little bit more straightforward and streamlined in the way scoring works, but it's still fantastic, and Jen and I were just pleased as punch to play it. I'd love to play it right now. Maybe in the coming months I'll do a full run through for it, and like Avenue before it, you'll be able to play along at home by printing out your own piece of paper and see if you can beat our scores. All I'm saying is, folks, Santa Maria is in my top 20 of all time, and Avenue is one of the greatest roll and writes of all time. Trails of Tucana continues the unbroken string of hits from Elif and Christian. 2 designers who I just want to keep seeing work together. And I'm glad they're going to, because that was my number 6. My number 5 is The Magnificent. It's from the same 2 designers, and where Trails of Tucana was a nice little lightweight roll and write following up from their big hit Avenue, Magnificent is a much deeper, richer, meatier, heavier Euro dice drafting game that follows up from Santa Maria. Now, don't get me wrong, it's a completely different setting. The dice drafting is very different, but oh my gosh, this game is really good. We are running competing circuses, and the dice we draft can be used to build up the tents we need for our circuses, to travel the countryside, to hire more employees, to be able to control the dice and get the values we need, and to actually to recruit entertainers and to put on shows. And the interesting thing is, the dice all have, well, much like Santa Maria, but again, in a very different way, but kind of similar, you pay attention to the number on the dice, but you also pay attention to the color. Because the color risks, because the colors are tied to different types of shows, whether they are animal show, acts, or, I forget there's 3 colors, so there's animal shows, fire shows, and mystical shows, if I recall correctly, something like that. And if I grab purple dice, I'm focusing on mystical shows. shows. That means I am making tents to put on mystical shows. I am hiring mystic performers, and I am, I'm probably, if I travel the countryside, hiring mystic employees to help put on the mystic shows. But the problem is, so you might think, oh, well, then I just want to focus because I can get better and more strong, because these dice compound. The first purple die I grab that say is like a 6, that gives me a power 6 action. The second purple die I grab in a given round that's like a 3, that doesn't give me a level 3 purple action. It's 6 plus 3. They add up and now it's a level 9 action. So if you can keep grabbing the same color, you just get stronger and stronger and stronger, and you can put on amazing, super powerful, focused performances. Here's the problem though. While you're encouraged to focus on a color, that gets more and more expensive, because at the end of the round, you have to pay for all the dice you drafted. The dice are kind of like advances on loans. At the end of the round, you got to pay for them. What you have to pay is the highest cost, or the cost of the most powerful collection of colored dice you got. So if I ended up getting 2 purple colored dice and there were a 5 and a 6, I have to pay $11. But if I got a 5 and a 6 and they weren't both purple, they were purple and orange, now if I look at it, although if I recall, you do 3 dice every round, but still, instead of paying $11 for these 2 dice, I pay $6 because I only have to pay the highest value. So you are encouraged to diversify and go into all the different colors, because that really just completely cuts your cost down to nothing. And that means you have a much more broad and variety-based circus that can maybe respond better to all the objective cards that become available over the course of the game. And that's a tough decision to make. And you'll have to do it several times over the course of the game as everything escalates. Because again, I can't stress, if you can make the money and you can focus on just one color of dice, you can do insane, super powerful moves. But you'll have to pay for it. The variety, the smartness, by the way, the presentation of this game is really lovely as well. Do not be fooled by the video I've done. And I should have said this is true as well for Circadians earlier. I was messing with my camera this month, and I think I got my brightness turned up too high on my games. And so they don't look quite so boom, burn your retinas in real life as they do in my videos. I gotta tweak that a little bit. Look at screenshots of Circadians and Magnificent, because I got a lot of feedback from people saying, oh, I don't like the look of that game. And I'm like, I've seen these games in real life, and I think they're really cool looking, really evocative, and just arresting the way they grab you. But I think maybe that's not translating onto screen because of my video settings. Anyway, sorry, as an aside, all that as aside, I'm just saying, Magnificent, it's my number 5 game of the month. Then we move on to number 4. The Masters of Renaissance. And now the full title for this is Masters of Renaissance, Lorenzo il Magnifico, the card game. And I'm just going to call it Masters of Renaissance because that second half, that's a lie. The interesting thing is, while Lorenzo il Magnifico is a brilliant worker placement game, and Masters of Renaissance has kind of the feeling and some of the theme of Lorenzo il Magnifico, the gameplay is radically different. This is not Lorenzo il Magnifico, the card game, because the card game generally implies, hey, it's still the same core gameplay, just simplified and streamlined down into a tighter card-based package. Here's the thing. The gameplay in Masters of Renaissance is radically different. It's just the setting that's the same. And there are fewer cards in the card game than there were in the original Lorenzo il Magnifico. So, sorry, it's a weird title. To me, this is just Masters of Renaissance, and it is a game where we are, Masters of the Renaissance, rich nobles trying to gather resources from the market so that we can build developments to run engines to convert goods into points. Standard stuff. In its heart, that's what Lorenzo il Magnifico was too. But there's no worker placement here. The very, very cool worker placement game of Lorenzo il Magnifico has been completely ripped out and replaced with a very, very cool market minigame. Because the market is a 3x4 grid of marbles. And on your turn, if you're going to try and get stuff out of the market, you pick a row or column and say, I'm going to get all the resources. I'm going to get 2 military and influence with or church or some stone out of that row. So you grab all those resources, which you'll use later to build development tiles or cards, and then you take the extra marble, you slot it in, and that basically completely reprograms the market. And suddenly, the move that somebody else thought they were going to get, oh, the market has totally changed. Can I get what I need now? And it's brilliant. This sliding, well, I was going to say this is reminiscent of Ulm. Game that came out a few years ago where you were sliding tiles into a grid, and that determined what types of actions you could do in a given round. Here, you're sliding marbles, which are more fun, let's be honest. They make a nice click-clack sound, and they roll down the track after they get ejected and all that stuff. And instead of doing actions, you're using it to harvest stuff that you can do actions with later. Both games use this idea of a constantly shifting grid by sliding puzzle stuff in and sliding other stuff out to great effect. Almost amazing. One of my top 10. I don't know. Masters of Renaissance might make my top 10 of this year, even though it's a very lightweight game. It is almost a gateway game. It's heavier than Cat Lady or Monster Baby Rescue, but not that much. It's still light enough that I could teach this game to anybody if they're interested in the subject matter. And oh my gosh, the toy factor of that little tray of marbles is so lovely. You know, it's reminiscent of, Potion Explosion and stuff like that. Really fun, cool stuff. My number 4, Masters of Renaissance. Moving on, number 3 is Bloomtown. And now, this is a very simple, again, this is almost a gateway light drafting game where we're trying to grab tiles to place them on our board to be able to build up our own little tiny city, watch the city bloom, our town bloom in front of us, and score points along the way, but depending on what types of tiles we get. Subways want to be adjacent to other subway tiles on the diagonal. Business office buildings want to be next to other buildings on the horizontal and vertical. Houses want to be surrounded, but residents want to be surrounded by different types of buildings. Stuff like that. So all the different types of tiles you can get have different scoring things. And when you get a tile, you draft it. You actually have a few in your hand. You pick one, you place it on your board, and you're trying to create these, the perfect little scoring tableau, to get the most points out of it. Here's the important thing, though. I take a tile from my hand, I play it, and I score points right away. If I put it in the right spot. But the spot I put it on tells me what tile from the supply I can grab to put in my hand. And so, the perfect place for me to put this subway tile to, score a bunch of points because it'll extend my subway in just the right way is going to force me to take that tile from the supply. And I don't want that tile. That tile is useless to me. I want that other tile over there that would give me another subway so I can keep pushing my subway. But if I want to get that tile, I have to put a current tile in another place on my board that isn't going to help me at all. And that sounds like a simple little decision, but it creates so much fun tension and, compromises you have to make. Okay, well, if I really want that tile, I'll put this other tile over here. It's really not going to help me that much, but it's going to give me this tile that's going to help big time because that one I put in this space. It'll do another thing, which, in 3 rounds from now, I put this over here. It gives me a tile that now lets me leverage the other tile I put over there that I thought was going to be useless to me. And so the setup chains of, I want to play this. It's going to allow me to grab that, which in the future turn I'll be able to do over there to allow me to grab that, is awesome. The other interesting thing about this game, too, again, there's this push your luck element, which I'm finding I'm really enjoying. Because every time you take a tile from the supply, a new one gets added, and sometimes scoring tiles come out. But they do not trigger scoring immediately. Remember I said, when you put a tile down, you score it right then. And then if new tiles come out, if enough tiles, I think if 2 scoring tiles that say, hey, score your subways come out. The second time one of those comes out, everybody who was scoring their subways as they went get to score their subway again. In a new and different way. And but it's not until 2 of those tiles come out. So the first subway tile comes out and I'm like, oh, the next subway tile that could trigger a scoring could happen at any time. I got to get my other subway tiles onto the board as soon as possible before the other scoring happens so I can maximize it. But that means I can't do that compromise I was talking about earlier to be able to get the perfect tile I wanted. So these 3 things just all butt heads and force you to make tricky, interesting, not super heavy or deep. It's still a fairly lightweight game, but really engaging decisions. And the game, it's just beautiful. It's so simple and pure and elegant. Again, this is a little bit heavier because of the different ways the different buildings score, but still, just barely Gateway Plus style gaming. And this is the best little lightweight tile drafting city builder I've played since Quadropolis. And oh my gosh, that game is amazing. And so is my number 3, Bloomtown. Moving on to number 2. Oh my gosh, such a good month. Let's talk about Paris, New Eden, which is another dice drafting game. Oh my goodness, this is crazy. For a dice drafting lover like me, my favorite mechanism of all time, good month. Here's the deal. Here's what makes dice drafting interesting in this post-apocalypse in the future, humanity has reverted to like the Eloi from H.G. Wells' Time Machine. Were they the Eloi? I forget. But simple Bronze Age humanity trying to survive in a future after nature has taken back the planet. And the game looks gorgeous. I love that setting. I love that scenario. That's all great. But what makes the game great is all the dice represent survivors that I can recruit by drafting them to add to my own little settlement. And they have different abilities. Medics obviously provide medical help, or warriors can help defend our settlements and stuff like that from wild animals and various sorts of things. So that's all cool. The interesting thing is, at the beginning of a round, you roll all these dice, and instead of them all just being in one pool that you draft from, like almost every other dice drafting game out there, including previous ones I've talked about, like Trismegistus or whatnot. Oh, no, that's not true. Trismegistus did this too. It's so brilliant to have all these dice get separated into different depots. That's what Paris New Eden does. And these depots have different functions. So the medic that I am desperate to get, I so want to draft that die, unfortunately, he's over at the storehouse. And that means I could get him, but I would do the ability of the storehouse, and I don't want to do the ability of the storehouse. I want to do the ability of the train station. Because that train, if I take a die from the train station, I'll get the ability of that survivor, and I'll get to recruit a permanent survivor tile. But the medic I want is over there. So I got to take that one, which means I'm just going to get some food, and I've got more than enough food. I'm not hurting for certain to feed my settlement. So do I sacrifice the medic I want to get the other thing I want and get a die I don't want? Again, you're seeing a pattern here, folks, that you'll see in most of these roundups. I like games that mean, because of the conflux of how the situation has been set up, I have to make tough decisions. That means I can't do everything I want to do. I have to sacrifice the bird in the hand to get the two in the bush. I have to get that. If I want that medic, I have to give up that other cool thing over there. And the game is constantly making you do that. And while that is going on, the draft is implicitly interesting and engaging. What we do with these dice is very engaging as well, because basically, the more dice I'm getting, they go towards an area control, because every round, there's different types of people. Like I said, there's warriors and medics and I can't think of what they all are now. But basically, they're different colors. There are buildings that are associated with those. And if I am that can be built every round. And not all buildings are created equal. Some buildings are awesome. Some are terrible. And if I have the most medics, I get first pick of which medical building I want to build and add to my settlement. And you better believe I'll pick the good one, not the bad one. And if you end up getting a medic, but I end up getting two medics, well, you have no choice. You have to build the terrible medic building. And so there's this level of tension of who's going to get the most medics and who's going to get stuck with the bad one. But one of the interesting things is some of the dice you can grab are wild cards. They can count for anything. And so there's this, I've got two medics. You've only got one, but I see you've got two of those wild cards. If you use both those wild cards, you'll beat me and you'll get the best medic building. But I've got a wild card too. Do I save it for when we get to the medic, or do I use it to win in this other metric, the soldier building over here? Really cool stuff. Gorgeous game. My only complaint, the only thing that kept this from being my game of the month, quite frankly, because the gameplay is perfect, I had to knock it down because the developers completely ignore theme. Every round, in addition to everything else that's going on, you have events that we are trying to prepare for, that we need to have the resources and the people on hand to be able to deal with them. And so that's another thing we're paying attention to when we're drafting. And these events don't have names. They don't even have pictures. So they're just, they kind of, the developers wear on their sleeve that this is a soulless Euro where theme has no meaning. And that's heartbreaking, because this could be an insanely thematic game if they had just done a little bit of work to name the events, to name the buildings. Just a little thing like that could have really made the game feel much more alive. And as good as the gameplay is, it's Game of the Month material, I knock it down to my number 2 spot because of their complete and total ignoring of a wonderful theme that could have made it come alive. That's my number 2. Paris New Eden, which leaves my number 1. Oh man, is this game good, folks. It's Foothills. Now, this is the latest game from designer Tony Boydell, although he has teamed up with, I think, first-time designer Ben Bateson, which really makes me think this is probably Ben's design and Tony helped him out with it. Although I don't know, I have no inside information. I could be wrong there, but regardless. This is Foothills, a Snowdonia game. This could be called, correctly, unlike earlier when I was talking about Lorenzo, this could have been called Snowdonia, the card game, and I think that would have been fair. Because, Snowdonia is a big worker placement board game where players are working semi-collaboratively to build a mighty train line over the Snowdonia Mountains. And the thing that's always been true about Snowdonia, and is equally true about Foothills, is it's a multi-step process. You got to clear the rubble away. You got to lay the track. You got to build the stations before that line can be considered done. And while I might do the first step, you might do the second and the third step. Or I might see, oh, you cleared out that rubble. Perfect. I can jump in now and lay the track now that you've done this for me. And so Snowdonia and Foothills are games that are all about looking for opportunities that your opponents create for you. Being careful not to create opportunities for your opponents while still doing what's best for you. And it works brilliantly in the original Snowdonia. I think Foothills, which again, you could call Snowdonia the card game, does it even better. Because there's several things it adds to the formula. The most important one is Snowdonia, everybody was just working on one great mighty train line. Now we have 6 individual train lines, and all these different train lines have interesting little quirks that make developing them different. And every time you play, the game comes with 7, and you're going to get a different combination of 6, and that will change the feel of the game. Also, it's not a worker placement game anymore. Instead, each player has 5 cards, and each card has a good action on one side, and a strong action on one side, and a different weak action on the other. And when I pick one of these cards to do the strong action, I then have to flip the card over, and I have downgraded that card and changed its function. So what I want to do is I want to do that weak function now so I can flip it back over and turn it back into a strong. But why would I do the weak build a station when I want to build a station? I've still got the strong version. But if I flip the strong station action, now I've got 2 weak cards. And they're going to stay weak until I find a good use for them so I can turn them back to their strong side. And not only that, not only am I juggling all these cards, switching them back and forth over the course of the game, but I can upgrade. I can jettison those cards and turn them into in-game scoring cards like Concordia, and then add new 2-sided cards to the mix that gives even more variety. Wow. Like I said, folks, this is my game of the month. Foothills is amazing. It does almost everything Snowdonia does brilliantly, and then it does cool, interesting stuff on top of it. Blown away. My #1 game of the month, Foothills. Phew. Okay, folks. I don't know how long that was. I feel like I dragged on a little bit, but I'm not going to drag on this ending. Hopefully, because a bunch of those games will be at Essenspiel. So hopefully this is of use to some. And even if they're not, they will be available soon. I mean, some of these are still on Kickstarter, worth checking out. But I am done. It was a busy month. I think next week, because this is 22 games I did in 3 weeks, basically. I'm going to take a break next week. We're going to relax a little bit. Maybe stop playing games for you days. I don't know. But November is on the horizon. It never ends. There's going to be a bunch of new games coming in. All the games from Essen that I didn't get to cover, which I feel bad about. I got to move forward. So I'll see you again. Not in a month, but in 5 weeks' time, since I'm a little bit early with the next roundup. And as always, folks, thanks for watching. Have a very nice day. Talk to you later. So long. Bye-bye.